The rain poured down in relentless sheets, drumming against the pavement as Detective Evelyn Carter pulled her coat tighter around her. The city streets were nearly empty at this hour, save for the occasional flicker of headlights cutting through the mist. She was used to the routine: late nights, coffee gone cold, and a case that never seemed to have an answer. But tonight felt different. Something in the air was off. It wasn't just the storm. It was a presence. A shadow in the periphery that had been following her for days. She first noticed him 2 weeks ago, just another face in the crowd. He was nondescript, easy to overlook, gray hoodie, hands in his pockets, the kind of man who could blend into the background of any city. But Evelyn had instincts honed by years on the force, and something about him sent a chill down her spine. He never approached, never spoke, but he was always there, across the street when she left the precinct, sitting 2 booths away in a diner she had never seen him enter. A ghost in plain sight. And yet, she told herself it was nothing. Probably just a paranoid trick of the mind, the way exhaustion can make anyone seem like a threat. But when she found the note in her car, she knew she wasn't imagining things. 4 words, scrawled in ink that had begun to smudge from the rain. "You missed something. Look." It was all it took. She barely slept that night, poring over every case she had worked on in the last 6 months. The glow of the desk lamp cast long shadows over the stacks of files, her apartment transformed into a war room of notes, crime scene photos, and scribbled connections. Cases she once thought were resolved now seemed riddled with holes, witness testimonies that contradicted each other, security footage that conveniently cut off at critical moments. The more she looked, the more patterns emerged. There was always a missing piece, something small enough to ignore at first glance but damning when put together. Phone records that should have existed but didn't. Coroner reports signed off too quickly. Surveillance cameras that mysteriously malfunctioned at just the right time. It was like someone had gone through her work, trimming the edges, ensuring she never saw the full picture. And then there were the disappearances, people who had been part of these cases, from suspects to informants, vanishing without a trace. Some turned up dead. Others simply ceased to exist in any official record. It was as if someone had erased them. Her fingers tightened around the note. "You missed something. Look." What if she wasn't just missing something? What if someone wanted her to? Her pulse pounded as she grabbed her coat, ignoring the chill creeping into her bones. She needed answers. And there was only one person who seemed to have them. But as she reached for her coat, a nagging thought crept into her mind: what if she was walking straight into a trap? This man had been following her for weeks, leaving cryptic messages, pulling her deeper into something she didn't understand. And yet, she was chasing after him, desperate for answers. She hesitated at the door, scanning her apartment one last time. The files were still scattered across the floor, red strings connecting photos and notes like a twisted web of evidence. She had spent years building a reputation as one of the sharpest detectives in the city, but now she felt like she was being played. Like she was just another piece on someone else's board. As she stepped outside, the cold air bit at her skin. Every shadow felt deeper, every passing car seemed to slow just a little too much. Had she noticed that black sedan before? Was that pedestrian actually just walking home, or was he watching her? The paranoia was setting in. But she couldn't turn back now. Evelyn wasn't new to threats. Being a detective in a city like this meant getting under the wrong people's skin. But this was different. This wasn't a warning. This was a message. And so, here she was, walking the empty streets in the dead of night, waiting for him to make a move. She turned a corner, boots splashing in shallow puddles, and then, there he was. He was standing under a flickering street lamp, face still obscured by the hood. But this time, he didn't turn away. He didn't vanish into the crowd like before. He was waiting. For her. Evelyn's fingers brushed the grip of her service weapon as she took a step closer. "Who are you?" she demanded, voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. He tilted his head slightly, as if considering whether to answer. The silence stretched between them, the only sound the distant hum of the city and the rain tapping against the pavement. Something about him unsettled her, not just his presence, but the way he stood, completely still, unshaken. Most people would show some reaction to being confronted by a detective. But he looked like he had expected this moment. Her fingers flexed against the grip of her gun. "Are you following me?" Still, he said nothing. Instead, he reached into his pocket. Evelyn's breath hitched. Her muscles tensed, instinct screaming at her to act. Time seemed to slow as her hand twitched toward her gun. 1,000 possibilities flashed through her mind. A weapon? A recording device? A badge? Who the hell was this man? The tension was unbearable. A single wrong move, and this night could end in blood. Was that his plan all along? To lure her into a confrontation? To make her pull the trigger? But then, instead of a weapon, he pulled out something unexpected. A notebook. Old, weathered, its pages curling at the edges as if it had passed through too many hands. And in that moment, something about him changed. The eerie stillness was gone, replaced by something else, resignation. He tossed it toward her feet without a word. Like he had already accepted whatever came next. In her line of work, this was the moment where everything could go wrong. He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his pocket. Evelyn's heart slammed against her ribs. Every instinct screamed at her to react, to draw, to prepare for whatever came next. Then, he tossed something toward her. A small, worn notebook. It landed in a puddle at her feet. She hesitated only a second before picking it up, flipping through its pages. And what she saw made her blood run cold. Case files. Her case files. Names, dates, details that never made it to the official reports. Information no civilian should have access to. But it wasn't just notes, it was corrections. Red markings scrawled over her findings, pointing out missed clues, overlooked details, inconsistencies in witness statements she had dismissed as inconsequential. And at the very last page, a newspaper clipping taped inside. Local businessman's disappearance declared suicide, case closed. Evelyn knew that case. She worked it herself. The evidence had been clear, a man drowning in debt, a final desperate act. Open and shut. And yet, beneath the article, in that same hurried handwriting, were two words that sent ice through her veins. Look again. She raised her eyes, but the man was already walking away, disappearing into the mist. Evelyn had spent years thinking she knew this city, that she understood its underbelly, its players. But tonight, she realized something terrifying. She wasn't the only one investigating. And whoever he was, he knew more than she did. If you want to uncover the truth alongside Evelyn, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Something tells me this isn't the last time she'll see him. And trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next.